Good morning. Very excited to be here with you. I hope you don't mind that I brought my mobile phone with me. I'm expecting a rather important call that could come at any second. I'm guessing that a lot of you are quite impressed by my phone. It's slick, modernistic design. It's a lightweight frame. It's a mere 24 pounds. And the best thing about it is if I want to make an outward call, all I do is crank the handle here that connects me to a operator who will then dial the desired number for me. And if that person happens to be standing right by his phone, then we're able to talk. It's as simple as that. So why did I really bring this phone? Well, I think that as our topic is innovation, we live in such a fast-paced world that we hardly have the time to pause, reflect, and look back to see how far we have come because of innovation. So I think a relic like this really brings that point home, because this device is only 75 years old. So 75 years ago, this represented the very pinnacle of telecommunications, and of course it was attached to a wall. Now compare that to the mobile phone or handheld device that we're all carrying around. And that gives you some perspective, because of innovation, how far we have come. So the topic that I like to talk to you about is this notion of finding a path to meaningful innovation. I think we all agree that innovation is important, but when we dig a little deeper and ask, how should we innovate? What is the right approach? What do we even call successful innovation? Then the topic becomes much more elusive. So what I like to share with you is what I think is a simplified and universally applicable path to meaningful innovation. And I think that you can use it whether you're in business, politics, education, urban development, social activism, or whatever else it is that you do. And I like to use the topic of mobile phones as a way to illustrate this path. So I think the first point is that we need to justify why it is so important for us to continuously innovate. And for me, this justification comes from the realization that there's no such thing as a perfectly and permanently satisfied target audience or customer. Think about your mobile phones. Is it perfect just the way it is? Or can you not think of one or even several things very quickly that you think could make it even better for you? I think that you can. And even if you were to say, no, my phone is perfect just the way it is, I would challenge you by saying that I think what you're feeling is not lasting satisfaction, but infatuation. And infatuation, by definition, wears off. And there, I think, is our golden platform to continuously innovate, because we have the opportunity to continuously re-infatuate our target audience. And any organization that doesn't do that is missing out on significant opportunities. The second point, then, is if we want to infatuate our target audiences, how do we do that? And I think for that, we need to think of ourselves as providers of what I call lifestyle enrichment. In other words, to think about how what it is you do enhances the way people live, work, play, learn, relate to one another. And I love this quote that talks about how successful innovations seamlessly integrate into our lives, our lifestyles, so that we don't even notice that they're new, or that we forget about how the world was before we had it, which is the case with mobile phones. Mobile phones have been around for only 20 years as far as public use. Yet it's hard to even imagine what it was like before they were around. And during those 20 years, they went from virtually 0 customers to almost 5 billion. So most of the world's population has a phone and is an integral part of their lives. So if we have that intent to infatuate our target audience, as well as to provide them with life-enriching offerings, then the next question is about mindset. And for this, I think what is important is to have a mindset of unconventional thinking, to challenge conventions, to aspire to be market-driving rather than market-driven. Market-driving means you're creating demand. Market-driven means that you're responding to existing demand. So here's a great quote by Henry Ford, which he said about his introduction of the Model T in 1908. Now, cars have already been around at that time, but they were widely regarded as these noisy, dangerous, unreliable toys of the rich. And no one really imagined them to be the successor of the horse and buggy as the principal means of mass transport until a visionary like Henry Ford created a package, an offering platform for automobiles that did have direct lifestyle relevance. Same with phones. 20 years ago, if you were to say mobile phones, it would have sounded absurd, ridiculous, because we were used to having phones in fixed places, fixed locations. So the idea of carrying one around and people having phone numbers rather than buildings or places was counterintuitive, illogical, until Nokia, the Finnish company, created an entire market space because they packaged mobile phones in a way that did have lifestyle relevance. So now we have the intent, we have the mindset. The fourth point, I think, is to define the market space that we want to go after. And for this, I use a visual mapping that I call an accordion chart, which, just like the instrument, flexibly stretches your definition of what it is you do. So the idea is to go through the thinking process of how do I define my business or whatever else I am doing the most narrowly possible, and then to expand that to its greatest possible definition. And in my experience, even the most innovative companies define what it is they do too narrowly and therefore miss out on much greater opportunities of relevance to their target audience. Let's again consider mobile phones. As its core definition, we could say that they're about mobile voice communication, and that's what they started out to be. But if we expand that a little bit, we would say that they are about mobile connectivity, and already we see much greater opportunities for innovation. But if we go beyond that, we say that mobile phones are really our personal companions. And as our personal companions, that they serve as the integration point, the convergence points between us and an entire portfolio of traditionally separate services and industries. Just name a couple of those. Certainly telephone, internet, music, television, film, photography, navigation, security, education, gaming, banking, and I'm sure you could name others. So once you do that and you start expanding the definition of what it is you do, that's when you start finding even greater opportunities for meaningful innovation. And the last step is implementation. In other words, when you have aligned your thinking, you have your intent, you have your mindset right, and you see the entire market space that you are relevant to, even those furthest away from your core activities today, then the idea is how do you convert that into systematic implementation? And for that, I recommend a process like Blue Ocean Strategy, which is a great structure to do that. So let me summarize. And here are all the 5 steps that I think lead us to meaningful innovation. And as you can see, I call this the Slingshot framework. And it's symbolic because I think that it launches us towards meaningful innovation. So the remaining topic that I'd like to talk about is how do you engage in this path? How do you quickly adopt and use it in whatever it is you do? And I'd like to reference this wonderful quote, an observation by Peter Mernholz, because I think it symbolizes a shortcut for doing that. Because as children, we were all highly creative, inventive, resourceful. But that perspective gets covered up as we get older. So what we can do is to reconnect with our inner child as a way of getting on this path to meaningful innovation. And so I like to enable you to do that by inviting you to take part in an international challenge. This is called the Imagination Kit Challenge, and it was started 2 months ago in connection with another TEDx talk that I gave in Europe. So in fact, Grand Rapids is the second global community to take part, which will then happen in all other places and continents. And the challenge is very simple. It's about taking a collection of random everyday objects, which you see a picture of here, and to ask you to create the most fun game that you can using only these objects. So you can go to this website, you can work in small teams, and you have a few weeks to do this. And by doing so, you not only have the chance to win some very cool prizes, but you can enter a global community of innovators, all of which are using the same objects, but look at them very differently to configure games. So you can share and you can observe how everyone is using the same tools, the same objects, and creating different things. But most importantly, the reason that I encourage you to partake is because the perspective of taking everyday random objects that surround us and all of a sudden looking at them as though they were props for a game and constructing games out of them is the exact same perspective that you would use to create meaningful innovation. In other words, to look at your environment, to look at the resources that surround you and see new meaning, new connection, and new values in them. So I encourage all of you to partake as the world awaits your invented game as well as your meaningful innovations. Thank you.